Welcome to my PowerPoint presentation on the failings of Dead by Daylight's 2v8 mode. 2v8 is a limited time game mode that essentially doubles a typical Dead by Daylight match. 2 killers hunt down 8 survivors. The mode features several modifications to a typical match, including expanded map size, extra tiles, alterations to generator and hook requirements, a rubber banding mechanic to allow the losing side to catch up, and a class system to replace perks. 2v8 mode has encountered a massive issue that has persisted in every iteration of its existence: extremely long killer queue times. This is largely due to the killer role being completely reimagined through a teammate, whereas the survivor role is nearly the same, having been a team-based experience already. Additionally, the lobbies require a massive number of 8 survivors to play each match. While the ratio is the same, keep in mind that you can make a normal match out of 2 killers and 6 survivors, but you cannot make a 2v8 lobby with the same. In other words, the pieces are bigger and don't necessarily fit together as well. Lastly, Behavior has implemented several things to encourage a greater survivor queue to what I'd consider middling success at best. For one, survivors have always gotten a massive blood point bonus for playing, unlike Killer. They also tried implementing 1 or 2 survivor bots per lobby to reduce the player count required to play a match. This failed spectacularly because survivors didn't want to play with incompetent bots and they were often much too selfish. Seriously, they'd used all the herbs in a trial and then leave everyone to die when the gates were open. Lastly, with the August 2025 season of 2v8, Behavior implemented the Play While You Wait feature, which allows killer players to play Survivor while they waited in queue. All this points to a pretty self-evident conclusion, and that is 2v8 Survivor is far less appealing to play than 2v8 Killer. This is not to say that Survivor is too weak or Killer is too strong. It's just how the mode functions and has been changed has led to a lesser interest in the Survivor role. I conducted a poll asking my audience if they were making use of the Play While You Wait feature, which I will refer to going forward as the multi-queue. In my experience, killer queues are still usually upwards of 20 minutes, so I suspected the multi-queue was not the silver bullet it was made out to be. I suspected that perhaps a large number of killer players were simply not using the multi-queue and therefore not easing queue times. While the multi-queue is an amazing quality of life feature, it does nothing to actually fix the issues driving the gap in role preference. I offered 4 responses to the poll, which were as follows. Yes, I want to play both Survivor and Killer in 2v8. Yes, but only to pass the time or help with queue times. No, I would rather wait or do something else than play Survivor in 2v8. Or, no, my queue times are short enough that I don't have to use it. A little over half of the responses chose the first option, wanting to play both sides of the game mode. This is a good sign that the multi-queue is being used, but I realize that the multi-queue can actually backfire because of this. If you have a player who is equally interested in playing Killer or Survivor, then they would likely choose to play Survivor simply because queue times are shorter alongside the blood point bonus. However, if you have the ability to queue for Killer at the same time, at least some of those players who would otherwise only play Survivor are now joining the Killer queue and mitigating the relief it was meant to bring. The second place choice was yes, but only to pass the time, and the third choice was no, I don't want to play Survivor at all. Both of these responses made a combined total of a little under half the votes. This reinforces the previous idea that Survivor is unappealing from a gameplay perspective, and this is concerning when this is half the player base. While it is good that a third of players are using the multi-queue anyway, it's not great that they're playing out of obligation. I know Dead by Daylight is a really scuffed game, to put it nicely, but we all play it for a reason, and ideally we want the game to be generally enjoyable even when there are points of contention. So what exactly is causing this outcome? The crux of the problem is that 2v8 is inherently unfriendly to survivors. Ironically, the main appeal of 2v8 for killers is the same thing that makes it so unappealing for survivors. Being able to tag team a survivor to take them down quickly feels great for Killer, but getting tag teamed by 2 killers as a survivor feels terrible, with the best counterplay usually being to stall for time by running as far as you can in a way that doesn't let them pincher you. This is unfortunately a key aspect of 2v8 mode, so there's no way to crack this in a way that doesn't avoid the main appeal of the mode. However, I have 2 suggestions that may help ease these situations. For one, I would suggest altering killer classes to encourage more solo playstyles. This would include buffs and bonuses granted when far away from your teammate rather than current classes such as Enforcer, which encourages you and your teammate to gang up on a single survivor. This change would reduce the odds of tag team situations happening in the first place, but also provide killers an option. Tag teaming is very strong, but you can get bonuses for chasing survivors solo, so it would require killers to make judgments on if it's worth helping your teammate to take someone down. Another change I would recommend is to allow killers to stun each other with their attacks. This grants a little more counterplay to the survivor in trying to get the killers to swing at each other and carries some risk to the killers in tag teaming. Also, I think it would be a good way to make the mode a little sillier. Another major problem 2v8 mode has is simply that the survivor side of the game is incredibly underwhelming. Broadly speaking, the game is the same as it is for normal mode. Drop pallets, vault windows, don't get hit. There are no major overhauls to the gameplay loop other than more resources spawning and altar generator requirements. While some of the classes do offer unique abilities such as being able to sprint burst on command, heal survivors mid-chase at once, or rebuild regular pallets, similar abilities can be found in other modes. That being said, you can still entice players to join a role with new content. Yet, oddly, behavior has shown seeming disinterest in actually expanding the survivor role within 2v8. Survivors have not seen any additional classes since their inception, and any unique elements such as herbs or fog crystals only stick around for one season before disappearing forever. While killers have also received no new classes either, they have received 2 to 3 new killers every update, aside from the current August 2025 season, which saw no new content other than a couple of balance changes. I find this particularly puzzling because killer has always been the disproportionately preferred role, so you'd think behavior would want to try to give survivors something new now and then. There are a few solutions I would consider to this problem. The easiest answer, of course, is to add new survivor classes to add more variety to the survivor gameplay. I've come up with a few ideas for classes that I will review shortly. A second idea is to further expand on survivor gameplay mechanics, such as simply enabling a 3-person heal. Lastly, behavior can add novel gameplay mechanics to switch up the typical survivor gameplay. They could go back and reintroduce herbs or an equivalent mechanic if that's prohibited due to licensing restrictions to add something different to the gameplay. Personally, I could take or leave the herbs, but they're at least something different. Another thing that I think could successfully be implemented would be the Blood Moon generators. 2v8 is already a fast-paced, chaotic game mode, so I think the Blood Moon generators that require you to traverse the map to complete your objective could be an interesting and fitting addition to the mode. Obviously, the Blood Moon event had its issues, such as these generators not being affected by killer perks or powers, but because 2v8 does not have any perks, nor are there currently any killers with a power that interacts with generators, I think 2v8 mode is a much safer environment for it. Some number tweaking might be in order, but I think this idea could be interesting. The first new class is called the Stealth Master. It is similar to the Scout, being a stealth-oriented class, but it does have some differences in how it functions. The aura skill is revealing the killer's aura when they begin chasing someone else in order to keep tabs on the killers and remain far away. The Stealth Master has a passive stealth radius which reduces scratch mark duration and has an active ability that causes you and nearby survivors to leave no traces for a short duration. The unlockable skill is essentially Distortion on a cooldown. The second class is called the Treasure Hunter, which is a secondary objective focused class. This class can see nearby chests and totems and can use their active ability bonus to rummage through chests for an additional item. Additionally, items found in chests are given add-ons. Their unlockable skill allows them to cleanse totems to heal 1 health state. This gives totems a function in 2v8 mode, which I assume were left in either because they would eventually be used for something, or removing them somehow meant hunters could fly. The third class is called the Martyr. Their aura skill allows them to see survivors near caged survivors so they know if they need to go for a save, as well as seeing injured survivors with more cage states than they have to encourage protection hits. Their active ability also allows them to take a cage state from someone they rescue, much like Shoulder the Burden. They also have a passive ability similar to Do No Harm. Their unlockable skill is essentially Solidarity. Overall, this class has very much a focus on short-term deficits for long-term gain. The fourth and final class I have crafted is called the Savior. When a killer harms a survivor, the Savior can see both of their auras. The Savior has an active ability bonus where they can perform a short dash to stun the killer. I would envision this to be similar to Old Dead Hard, but having greater ending lag. If you stun the killer, you're able to make some distance, but if you dead hard for distance, you're a sitting duck. The Savior also has a passive ability that, when they rescue a survivor about to be caged, the rescued survivor leaves no trace for a few seconds. Lastly, their unlockable ability is a modified form of Medal of Man in which taking a protection hit while injured will prevent you from going down once per cage state. This class, much like the Martyr, is all about altruism. Reason number 3. Now, this is something of a personal gripe, but Legion is quite possibly the most boring killer to face in 2v8. He goes fast, makes you sit there and mend, and is generally just a nuisance. He's not particularly fun or engaging to go against, and the weaknesses of his power are mitigated by a second killer being able to get the down. This may not be so bad if it weren't for the fact that, at least in my observations, he's one of, if not the most popular killer. He has a very low skill floor, making him an easy choice for casual players, which is what you'd expect when you're playing a mode with no MMR. I know this is subjective, but he gets real old real fast. I don't really have any good answers, I just think they should have prioritized other killers. The only real change I could think of would be to make his power more like normal mode, like taking 4 hits to down someone in exchange for reduced range and speed. It would reduce how quickly he can cripple the team, as well as encourage more thoughtful use of his power, but I really couldn't say how effective this change would be. Other than that, I do also have a few miscellaneous quality of life changes for Survivor that I feel are worth considering. For one, removing certain items from chests like Alex's toolbox would be a welcome addition given how Sabotage is not present in 2v8 and its repair bonus is a guaranteed time loss. I also think the cage logic needs to be reworked a little bit, especially for certain maps. Sometimes a killer cages a survivor and within 10 seconds the killer and survivor are next to each other again. While this is not common, it happens enough for me to notice. And if I were playing Spirit or Blight, that would be one thing, but it happens when I'm playing Huntress, so something's up. Additionally, on certain maps like RPD, survivors pretty much get sent to the farthest part of the opposite side of the map. It's pretty easy to get a good idea on where they'll spawn. Lastly, as far as cages go, the relocation mechanic feels a little unresponsive. I know they didn't want killers to relocate survivors just as they're about to be unhooked, but it feels like the changes they implemented made it go the other way around, where the killer has to be camping the survivor pretty egregiously to make it work. If they do manage to chase a survivor away from the rescue, the caged survivor won't relocate because another survivor is technically nearby, being chased. Another thing that I didn't quite understand was how the base heal speed of survivors was unchanged. 2v8 mode is a very fast-paced mode where killers have enhanced powers, survivors have more resources, and generators are much faster. I find it a little odd that healing was left untouched, as it makes me feel as though being a healer is a necessity. With how easy it is to become injured, it feels like a second health state is very, very important in the mode. I do think it may be worth considering reducing overall heal speeds and adjusting other speed changes accordingly. Lastly, I think survivors should get endurance for picking themselves up. There is very little incentive to slug in 2v8 mode, partly because survivors can pick themselves up, but also because there's far less time investment in caging survivors and flashlights are less available. So far, the only opportunities I've had to actually pick myself up as a survivor is either against an Oni who wipes the team in one go, or more often when the killer hovers over my body so I can't do anything. Self-pickup in 2v8 feels like it's in a really weird middle ground where there's little chance to use it in the first place, and most often it doesn't change much when you can. Granting survivors some endurance when they pick themselves up would at least solve killers slugging purely to be malicious. Sure, it could lead to bully squad swifts hovering for a save, but keep in mind 2 things. Number 1, the killer has a teammate who can help, and number 2, even if that teammate isn't available, both situations can lead to one player being helpless, but the bully squad scenario is a little harder to achieve, less likely to occur, and also more in line with the intended gameplay loop. That's my cost-benefit analysis. Before I end things off, I know I yapped a lot, and pretty much everything here is a buff to Survivor because, surprise surprise, making the Survivor role more interesting involves giving them things that they can't get elsewhere. But absent of everything else I just recommended, is there another way to solve the killer queue crisis? Well, I have something of an idea. While the multi-queue was a good quality of life feature, it isn't a solution. However, what if we revisited the idea of bots? But rather than mixing them in with real survivors and taking their experience, what if we had 2 queue lines for killers? The idea here is that the killer queue is split in 2 lines. You have a line for matches with real survivors, and then another line for matches with 8 bot survivors. Killer players alternate between these lines after each match. This should essentially cut the killer queue in half, assuming behavior has the server capacity for it. While killer would be less fun against bots, it would be, at the very least, a way to more quickly experience killer in 2v8 without costing anyone an experience they wouldn't want to have. Is this a silver bullet? Absolutely not. But frankly, I think it's an idea that would be the path of least resistance here. Thank you for watching, leave a like, and put your thoughts in the comments below.